Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
The new year rings in Governor Schwarzenegger's new budget proposal following his final State of the State address on Wednesday. Sacramento lawmakers agree on dramatic education reforms that allows the state to compete for millions of dollars in federal funds. And Google enters into the mobile phone business is symbolic of how big technology companies are competing for each other's business. And a new conversation with San Francisco District Attorney Kamala Harris. That's all coming up next. Good evening, I'm Belva Davis, and welcome to This Week in Northern California. We began with some stories from the news in this first week of the new year. Oakland Police Chief Anthony Batts is calling for the demotion of 2 supervisors. The men were singled out in a report released this week on the killing of 4 police officers by a parolee last March. The investigation found that a series of blunders and a lack of leadership contributed to the deaths of 2 of the 4 officers. The $1 billion reconstruction of Doyle Drive, the connector between San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge, starts on Sunday. A popular shortcut between the Marina and the Richmond District in San Francisco will be the first to close. An infusion of $50 million of stimulus funds enabled the project to start a whole year early. Former Republican Congressman Richard Pombo says that he will seek the open seat in the San Joaquin Valley's 19th district. The embattled Pombo lost his 11th district seat after 11 terms to Democrat Jerry McNerney in 2006. Known for his anti-environment policies, Pombo has environmentalists vowing to fight his political comeback. Well, in celebration of the 100th birthday of its historic home on Geary Street in San Francisco, the American Conservatory Theater will host a landmark celebration tomorrow. The free open house for the community includes free performances, presentations, and behind-the-scenes tours. Now, on our news panel tonight, David Spark, tech reporter for Green 960, and Nanette Asimoff, staff writer with the San Francisco Chronicle, and Carla Marinucci, political writer, also with the Chronicle. Carla, with the governor facing some $20 billion new in deficit and with a new budget and his last chance to say what he wants for the state, how and who gets hurt or helped the most with this final budget?
Well, Belva, we heard the budget details today, and we're talking about $83 billion spending plan that he put out there. And this is a plan that has a lot of pain in it, as he said. No tax hikes, and no education cuts, but so much other reduction and pain that Democratic Senate Leader Darrell Steinberg's response was, "Are you serious?" even before this thing is out there. We're talking about cuts for state workers, 200,000 of them who've been furloughed 3 days a week. Ain't going to happen anymore. They're going to get at least a 5% pay cut and being asked to put another 5% into a pension plan. That's going to come in for some major political debate, I think, up in Sacramento. The governor's talking about reducing the state parks budget entirely, getting rid of it and paying for it with offshore oil drilling instead. Darrell Steinberg said, that's a non-starter. We've already debated offshore oil drilling. That ain't going to happen. And I mean, in terms of, there's some very serious reductions in health and human services. We're talking about $3 billion. And these are the things that when we're talking about pain for some of the poorest people in this state, this is where it's really going to hit home.
Well, is this one of the things that a governor in his last swing at the plate can do? Propose things that maybe he sees as very difficult to enact?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people feel when they, and I was up there this week for the seventh and last State of the State address, and a lot of people said, you know, he did swing for the fences. He had a very ambitious agenda, But hey, he's been there 6 other years. Where were some of these hard choices back then? He didn't make them, and he has proposed some things to help mitigate some of this. A $500 million job plan. He's talking about a constitutional amendment to protect education funding and make sure that prison funding is never higher. He's even talked about privatizing the prisons. That's another plan that is going to come in for a lot of debate. At this point, Schwarzenegger still has the bully pulpit, and it's very clear from what we saw this week with this ambitious agenda. He does not intend to go out as a lame duck, but this is a lot to put on the plate in Sacramento, and I think he is going to take a lot of heat for some of these proposals. Is that a long shot
that prison, so if he privatizes pieces of the prison system and takes that money and funds higher education, which I understand is the proposal, is that's also a non-starter, is dead in the water?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I mean, we talked to State Attorney General Jerry Brown up there this week, who said, hey, I'd like to hear more on it, but I have a lot of concerns about, as we know, other states, Arkansas and some of the other states have had serious problems privatizing prisons. Yes, billions could be saved possibly, but there has to be a lot of work and a lot of look into that one before particularly Democrats up there are going to go for that. Protecting education funding, everybody liked that idea, but as we know, they've taken a big hit in the last couple of years, even to restore what we've seen. The governor did say, though, no more tuition increases for the University of California, and he wants to protect that funding. So it looks like all those student protests actually may have had an effect up there.
He named that.
But can they do no budget cuts for education? Because I remember being on this show with you before saying education is such an enormous part of our budget that every time we do a budget cut, which we had before, some of it has to come out of education. So
yeah, I mean, no, I think the political will is no longer there to sustain cuts in education. The Democrats are drawing a line in the sand on that, and also saying when it comes to some of these social service cuts, when you're talking about Medi-Cal, home health care, they're talking about reducing the pay of these home health care workers who already get minimum wage, CalWorks programs, welfare programs. These are programs that are already so hard hit. The Democrats are saying, no way, no how. But what we're hearing from Republicans, of course, is we don't want any new taxes. So there's going to be a debate, and look for maybe not new taxes, but higher fees. They're already talking about raising some of the penalties on, say, red light running to forget it. You may have to mortgage your house if you run a red light from now on.
Why did Schwarzenegger bring the federal health care debate into this? Why does
that was very
favor
interesting.
Of that, and then he does his turnaround.
Absolutely. I mean, just 2 weeks ago on Christmas Eve, the governor sent out a letter saying to Pelosi, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, hey, we're still with you. I still want to work with you on health care. This is a very important thing. And yet this week it was health care is a non-starter. This is a health care program to nowhere. He told the congressional delegation to vote against that. We talked to Pelosi today in San Francisco, and she said she understands the governor's concerns, but he doesn't have to worry that California will get its fair share of federal money. And that is the other thing. The governor is expecting to get about $7 billion from federal funding. A lot of people are saying good luck on that one. This is not the year that may happen.
And that brings us to your topic, and that is money from Washington, from the federal government. The Obama administration's proposed this money in a program called Race to the Top. Right. What does that mean in California? I know the legislature thinks it means a lot.
The legislature does think it means a lot, and what it is, it's a contest. It's a clever idea from the Obama administration. You can just sort of see them sitting around and saying, well, no child left behind, which is the education law of the land. No one likes it. There's no money attached. What can we do that will inspire people? So they come up with a contest, and it's got more than $4 billion that's held out as the carrot. And the answer is, states, you compete for a piece of this. Show us here in Washington that you've got some great ideas for education, and if you win, we'll give you a piece of this money. And so California, like pretty much every other state, wants to compete. California stands to get $700 million up to that. And so just yesterday, the governor signed legislation that would put California in line to compete The application deadline is January 19th, so it's a big competition
Start
for
writing
this
now.
money. Start writing now. And lo and behold, lots of people don't like it.
In fact, we're already seeing some cities saying they want to opt out of this.
They wanna opt out.
Why?
Because even though there's some money attached to it, it also has a lot of strings attached to it. So, for example, in California, the teachers' unions really don't like this, and other educator groups don't like this because the devil is in the details. If you look at what the Obama administration is asking for, they want data and test scores to be part of this. And so part of this contest in California is that teachers and administrators could be judged by test scores. So what teacher wants to have, somebody say, all right, you've got kids who don't speak English and they score a whole lot less than the kids across town who, do speak English. You haven't brought your kids' test scores very much, no raise for you. So.
Well, one thing
That's fear.
that's been talked about a lot coming out of this is the fact that parents could close schools. There was choice that you could send your kid to a school that wasn't even in your district.
But how much
there's-
control do parents really
Yes.
have? I mean,
Yeah.
what can a parent do?
Well, this is what, at present, not all that much, but the idea is that if you have a school, and this would be limited to about 75 really low performing schools. But suppose you send your kid to one of these low performing schools and you get half the parents in your school to say, well, we really don't like the way the school is run. We don't like the principal. We don't like the administrative processes. So let's sign a petition and demand that something's to be changed. Under Race to the Top, you can do that. And schools, understandably, a little bit nervous. They like to keep control over the way
I had a
they
friend
run their own.
who worked for the San Francisco Unified School District, and I believe you can get tenure in just a few years in the school district. And there was one teacher at the school that was just horrible. Everyone didn't like her. And just, forget about parents. Just within the school, it was so impossible to get her fired. How do you get people fired normally within the system if you don't like them?
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah, so why, if you're out of the system, I would think it'd be doubly hard.
I don't know that this actual Race to the Top is about ways to get any individual teacher fired or anything like that. And it is hard to get an individual fired. And so I once did a story that it cost $1 million to get one teacher fired.
But they really kind of pitched the fact because if you don't like the principal, you can get them out of there. I mean, that was one of the arguments made.
It's rhetoric, but
Yeah.
really what it refers to is this 50% provision where parents will be able to say, we want to have our school overhauled in some way. Maybe we want to change it to a charter. Maybe we want to change all the staff. There's all these prescribed ways that are now sort of known to people through No Child Left Behind, which is not very different from that. And parents will be able to ask for this, and that's what's got teachers' ire going.
Now, if California got all the money that they hope to get, it
If.
would be 1% of the school budget.
Yes.
This allows parents to move their kids around the state. Transportation has to be provided. All of these things are proposing. So when would we get the carrot?
When would we get the carrot? Indeed, I think that's what's so iffy about this. Nobody really knows, will we get the money? I think the money would come in April or spring, and then there's another round you could try for. And nobody, by the way, has said, nobody in the Obama administration has said how many states will ultimately get it. So it may be many, maybe few. But I think that it's just not seeming to be worth it to many people. And a lot of these are like No Child Left Behind. You can already move your children out of underperforming schools under current law. So, things are not too different.
All right, so not too different, but we do have some new laws that have been fought over for the last 30 years that are now part of the system, for the education system for California. So we have something else new coming out of the tech world. We have Google going into mobile phones, and what does that mean in our lives, and how is that changing the whole tech industry?
This phone, called the Nexus One, is actually, the phone itself is not a big story. The way Google is introducing it is a big story, and the way people are talking about it, they're calling it game-changing. And the way I like to say it is, well, they're actually kind of changing it the way it should be. Think about the way you buy a mobile phone currently. You want to get the iPhone? Well, you're going to have to make a deal with AT&T. You want to buy the Droid? Well, you're going to have to make a deal with Verizon. Well, what Google's doing is they're going to sell the phone first, And it's not just going to be their phone, over time it's going to be other phones, but it's only going to be via their website. And then after you pick the phone, then you select which carrier you want. And you can have one phone that can go on to a series of carriers, which is kind of the way it should be, right? Because think about it, you go to buy a television, you want to go get a Panasonic, well, you're going to have to go with Comcast, and you want to get a Samsung, well, you're going to have to get DirecTV. I mean, we don't do that normally, but we've kind of had to deal with it with phones, and hopefully this is going to shake up the industry and make the companies do that.
David, that was one of the interesting things about the story this week. A lot of them had the theme of another step toward world domination. Is Google trying to take over, every market? Is that what
Well,
this is
Google
about?
is large. Yes, they are large. But let me step back and just say, anybody who is selling a digital product, so it could be your cable company, your phone company, Apple, Google, can physically get into other people's business. So whether it's phone or television, whatnot, and that's what you're seeing. Your cable company's becoming your phone company. Your phone company's becoming your television company.
Maybe they just didn't want to be left behind.
That too. But what they're seeing is companies that have a good brand and are succeeding with customer service can then create other services because it's cost efficient for them to do that and sell more services to customers. But with regards to Google dominating everything, Google's main goal is to get you looking at a lot of screens that have their advertising on it. So if you're looking at your computer screen, you're looking at search, that's great. And then you're going to look at your computer screen and do a word processing document using Google Docs, that's great. And then you're reading content and you're seeing their ads, great. Well, now you're looking a lot at your phone and you're seeing ads. And so this is all part of the thing. They want you looking at more screens with their ads.
So
That's
is
how they make
everybody
money.
going to do this? I mean, is that
That's what
next?
I was wondering. Is
Yeah.
everybody going to go into this method?
Well, that's their hope. Their hope is that this will become the new model, that, it's kind of the normal model of you buy the device and you decide what service you want to go with.
That's not inviting competition?
Well, no, it is
better
inviting
for- I
competition.
think it's better
Here's
for-
my feeling. This phone could be a colossal failure and they would be an enormous success because it's all about opening up the market, this new kind of a market where you get the phone first. Because right now, all you can do is buy this Google Nexus 1 phone on their site, but they're going to open up where any of the Android phones, and Android is the operating system that Google created that runs these phones, and it's going to be on many different devices. It's not just
but
going to
I
be the
think
phone.
what you're saying is these companies are going to be trying to compete to do what's better for the consumer. Is that?
Well, handset manufacturers are going to sell devices, and then all the telcos that are selling the actual connectivity, the service, are going to try to sell their service instead of just trying to sell handsets and service.
Is this going to lower prices for us, A? And B, does this mean we're going to get all those cool apps we get on the iPhone? Are they going to be available on
That's a
Google?
very good question. So yes, hopefully it will. Hopefully what it will do will it'll cause all the telcos to telephone companies to increase the quality of their service and also their customer service, and then hopefully fight for your dollars, compete on price heavily. And then in terms of apps, yes, I mean the application market on the iPhone has been phenomenal. There are 115,000 apps. They've been around a year and a half. They've created an enormous industry. Just blocks from this studio, there's this company Zynga. They got hundreds of employees making hundreds of millions of dollars. Only been around for a few years, and they sell apps on the iPhone and via Facebook too. And I mean, we've got a lot of thanks to Apple
For
in
the
this whole
senior
thing.
crowd, to explain the app.
The application is a program that is on your phone, and these existed before the iPhone. But the iPhone really popularized it because it also made us understand the pricing mechanism of apps. Before the iPhone, through Windows Mobile, there were some apps that were selling for hundreds of dollars. Now apps sell for between $0 to $10.
So who's mad about this? Somebody's got to be mad about this thing.
I would say day one, the person who was mad about it was Motorola because they released a Android phone called the Droid, which was all the buzz, and they spent a lot of money on it. And now this just took the wind out of their sail with the new Google Nexus 1, which is pretty hot. Everyone likes it because it's faster. You can do any text that you see on the screen, you can voice activate. But the advantage of the Droid is it actually has a keypad that you can actually press, a physical keypad.
Some people like that.
And also the telcos immediately are going to be angry because, hey, this is our business model and you're going right after it. And, well, if anyone can go after the business model, Google can.
But even with this, you have to get one carrier in order to get efficiency out of this phone, correct?
Well, yes, but you can switch carriers
Yes,
too.
but the most effective way would still be through, what is it?
T-Mobile.
T-Mobile.
Well, okay, day one is T-Mobile, but sometime in 2010, Verizon will be, and hopefully the goal is all the carriers will make available. It doesn't work perfectly, not to get into technical jargon, but certain chips don't work with certain carriers and whatnot. But it's one of these things over time we'll start to see it.
I wonder what we did with our money before we had apps and things to buy. Thank you very much, David. Thank you, Minette. And thank you so much, Carla. In a moment, District Attorney Kamala Harris joins us. Well, Kamala Harris is San Francisco's first woman district attorney and the first African American woman to hold the office in California. Her new book, Smart on Crime, A Career Prosecutor's Plan to Make Us Safer, offers some new solutions to fighting crime in our communities. So welcome,
Thank you,
Kamala
Belva.
Harris.
Thank you.
You know, we were talking about education over there just a few minutes ago, and in your book, education plays a big part. How do you connect education and crime fighting and smart crime fighting?
Well, essentially, it all boils down to the public health model, which tells us that the best way to deal with an epidemic is prevention. It's the least costly and most effective. If we lose that, then let's get into early intervention once the sniffles start or once we see signs. And if we are at the point, however, of dealing with the epidemic in the emergency room, it's much too late and it's much too costly. So using that as what has been proven to be an effective model and applying that to the crime epidemic, I would suggest to you that an issue such as elementary school truancy, an elementary school child who is missing 30, 40, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year is a very early and clear sign of who invariably will be the high school dropout and then the victim of crime and the perpetrator of crime. And so a lot of what I talk about in the book addresses issues involving children through that prism of understanding that there are clear signs that have been proven to me as a career prosecutor and all of us. And if we address those issues at the front end, it'll be cheaper and more effective than dealing with the recidivist criminal who is part of the revolving door of the state prison system that you all were talking about earlier.
And you use the term smart on crime throughout your book. That is the key. What does that mean, smart on crime, especially in a world that we live in where money is so scarce to do anything, to make any kind of structural changes?
Well, it's a slogan of mine, born primarily out of my feeling that for too long we've asked these very simplistic questions about criminal justice policy that offer only two choices. You know, either you're soft on crime or you're tough on crime. And instead, I suggest we should be smart on crime, which means really let's build metrics into our measure of how effective we have been with our criminal justice system. And let's recognize that while all of us have the goal of achieving public safety, the system that we have designed is not actually working when you look at the dollars spent and the failure of certain systems. So for example, you look at the prison system in California. On an annual basis, we release 120,000 prisoners because they have served their time. But within 3 years of their release, 70% reoffend. It's called recidivism. It's the highest recidivism rate in the country. And I will share with you what you probably know, which is that the California Department of Corrections occupies about a $10 billion budget item in a state budget that is on the verge of bankruptcy, see earlier discussion. And looking at those numbers alone, we can see that we are not achieving a goal. And so part of the smart on crime philosophy suggests that we should pay attention to that fact. We should pay attention to recidivism as one of the biggest challenges to public safety and focus on that. And so, for example, in the book Smart on Crime, I outline what we've done in San Francisco, which is we've created a reentry initiative called Back on Track that's focused on the 18 through 24-year-old first-time low-level nonviolent drug sales offender, where we've partnered with the private sector, the Chamber of Commerce, with our friends in labor, the building trades, and community nonprofits, and we've addressed a lot of what your panel was talking about. The fact that these 18 through 24-year-olds, a lot of them are parent, parents who have a natural desire to parent their children, but not necessarily the skills. So we bring on board the community-based organizations. We deal with the fact that most of them need to get a GED and be enrolled in City College. None of them have employable skills, so let's enroll them in the apprenticeship programs offered by the carpenters and the plumbers. And over the course of the last 4.5 years, Back on Track has it basically reduced the recidivism rate for this population from 54% to less than 10%. It's been so successful, in fact, that the United States Department of Justice has chosen it as a model of innovation for law enforcement in the United States. And a couple of weeks ago, Governor Schwarzenegger actually signed into law a bill that we wrote that was carried by Speaker Karen Bass, so that as of January, we will have Back on Track in California's penal code as a model of what we should be doing to be smart on crime.
And yet you can't run away from the charges of those who do not agree with you. They call it soft on crime, that you can't be a social worker as a prosecutor.
Well, I think that, again, that's a simplistic view when people think that you cannot recognize that there are many layers. You have to also recognize that crime is not monolithic. I strongly believe, and the work of my office has proven it to be true, that when we're talking about serious and violent crime, lock them up. In San Francisco, in my office, we've increased the conviction rates for the DA's office to the highest they've been in just under 15 years. But when we're talking about nonviolent crime, that is actually the crime that is occupying the bulk of our public resources and beds in our state prison system. And we need to have a meaningful system to reduce the likelihood that that revolving door will continue. Reentry initiatives have been proven to be the antidote to the revolving door problem. And that's why the National District Attorneys Association chose Back on Track as a model for DA's offices around the country. And I would tell you that my fellow elected DAs from around the country are not anything close to being soft on crime.
Well, there's one other charge that I know in a state you're running for office, and that is your position on the death penalty. That you must be asked that question by everybody.
I'm personally opposed to the death penalty, but I'll follow the law. My position on the death penalty is the same as 4 of the last 9 attorneys general of California. And the focus that I think most people want to see when we talk about the role and the responsibility and capacity of the Attorney General on this issue of the criminal justice system is to provide leadership around innovation and recognizing that we are in a rut. We had that conversation with your panel, and we need to get smarter around, measuring outcomes and figuring out that what we all want is public safety. We don't want rhetoric that is framed through ideology. We want results, and that's what Smart on Crime is about as well.
All right. We want to thank you so much, District Attorney Kamala Harris,
Thank you,
for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's all for tonight. Remember to go to our website at kqed.org/thisweek for the question of the week. What are the most critical public safety issues in your community, and how should they be addressed? You can also watch complete episodes of this program and segments, subscribe to our newscasts and our podcasts, and comment on the program. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.